Okay, thank you, Jim. Good evening and welcome to the November 27th, 2023 meeting of the Barnstable Planning Board here at Barnstable Town Hall, 367 Main Street, Hyannis, Mass., the James H. Crocker Jr. Hearing Room, second floor, at 7 o'clock p.m. This evening, we're holding a joint meeting with the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Commission. The meeting notice has been previously filed with the town clerk in accordance with Mass General Law. All materials may be accessed through the Planning Board website or by contacting Karen Pina at karen.pina@town.barnstable.ma.us or calling 508-862-4064. I will now call the meeting to order and turn it over to Cheryl Powell.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. So I will be calling the HHDC, the Hyannis Main Street and Waterfront Historic District Commission, commissioners call to order first and then handing over to planning. So we have two people who did notify us, or did not notify us, but who did not appear here to be here tonight on commissioners. One did Commissioner Doherty will not be able to be here, and we did not hear from Commissioner Hinckley Needham. But I will now call in Commissioner Cronin. Here. Commissioner Carley. Here. Commissioner Clark.
Here.
And Commissioner Matthews.
Here.
And Vice Chair and Commissioner Jack Kay.
Here.
And I, Cheryl Powell, Chair of the HHDC, am also here, and I'll turn it over to the planning.
Thank you very much and welcome. I'd like to introduce our planning members this evening, starting with Michael.
Good evening.
And Matt.
Good evening, Matt Tague.
And Tim.
Good evening, Tim O'Neill.
And myself, Steve Robichaud. And also we have Jim Kupfer and Karen Pina with us as well. Notice of recording: the meeting will be televised live via Xfinity Channel 8 or High Definition Channel 1072. It may also be accessed via the Government Access Channel live stream on the Town of Barnstable's website, streaming85.townofbarnstable.us/cablecast public site. And our first, the only item on tonight's agenda is our Unified Downtown Hyannis Design Guidelines and Regulations in accordance with Section 240-24.1.3.b2a. The Planning Board will review proposed amendments to the Design and Infrastructure Plan along with the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Commission. We're going to lead off this evening with a presentation from Jim Kupfer giving a summary of the item before us.
Just to interject, Mr. Chair, it is a public meeting. Do we need to vote it open?
Thank you, Tim. Yes, let's start with that. We have a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Thank you, Michael. And a second from Cheryl. Appreciate that. I'll start with my members, and then we'll go on to yours, if that's okay. Michael?
Mr. Chairman, if we have a first and a second from each board. And
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
That was just going through my mind.
That was the good idea. So we'll do two separate motions. All right. So motion from Matt and a second from
I'll second.
Tim. Thank you. All those in favor? Michael?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Yes.
Tim? And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. And a motion from...
And thank you for that clarification. It was just going through my mind at the time. So may I please have a motion to open the item in question for tonight? So moved by Commissioner Crowley. Is there a second?
I second.
Double
Seconds.
Double seconds. Commissioner Cronin. Aye. Commissioner Crowley. Aye. Commissioner Matthews.
Aye.
Commissioner Clark. Sorry, you were hidden back there. Commissioner
Aye.
and Commissioner Kay.
Aye.
I also say aye.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The public hearing is open. And Jim, you may proceed.
Excellent. Thank you all for having me tonight. My name is Jim Kupfer. I'm the Assistant Director of Planning and Development, and I'm here to discuss the Downtown Hyannis Unified Design Regulations and Guidelines. I want to start off by thanking every one of you guys and actually members of the audience and public who participated throughout these 6-7 months of reviewing Downtown Hyannis, reviewing our existing guidelines, and really making a concerted effort to improve both our community and these guidelines. I just want to quickly review our process. In March, we had a kickoff meeting with a joint meeting, much like tonight, of the Planning Board and Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Commission. That was on Zoom at the time. And we discussed our path forward, what we would like to see done. I'll remind the group and the public, prior to this, there was a lot of discussion about how we can do this, how we can improve our design guidelines. You know, we have two design standards to date. You have the 2012 supplemental guidelines that are before the Historic Commission, and you also have the 2005 Design and Infrastructure Plan for the Planning Board. Both of these design guidelines and criteria are for the respective commission and boards, but have some overlapping jurisdiction, which we'll get into shortly. And so a lot of discussion was had maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, about how we can begin to enhance those regulations or those guidelines. So we asked for a working group to get established. We did so. We had a couple of members from each of this commission and board, along with a few counselors and some of the stakeholders in our community. And we went, you know, we strapped up our boots and walked the district and looked at, you know, what we liked, what we didn't like, you know, what could obviously be improved, and what are some things that we truly want to preserve. In May, we started with an outline of what enhanced guidelines could look like, and we began to try and marry the two districts, that of, again, the commission and the downtown Hyannis for infrastructure plan. In July, the board and commission met to review some of that early feedback of the outline and the public feedback, and we enhanced that into a more robust draft. And that draft then went out to public review in August. That went out through our town communications, you know, went through our, you know, picked up by the local news media, was discussed at the Greater Hyannis Civic Association, and that public comment period was then extended through much of September, while we continued to receive great public feedback. In October, that draft update design guidelines and regulations were then posted and submitted to you all for your consideration. And tonight is our first opportunity to then reconvene both the board and the commission to review those changes or the update of the unified design regulations and guidelines, and begin to, you know, continue that process of hopefully adopting enhanced design guidelines and regulations that you can use moving forward. So with that, I have the draft on the screen. It is posted online, and so readily accessible. We may have a couple extra copies, not sure. It's a pretty hefty document, so I know we try to limit the amount of paper and ink that is used. So a couple big picture items, big, you know, kind of framework items. Again, we have two documents we're trying to marry, and so hence how that title got longer and longer, the Downtown Hyannis Unified Design Regulations and Guidelines. And as you all probably astutely have noticed, regulations and guidelines are now flipped. We had it as guidelines and then added regulations to this process. Those are now flipped to feel the importance of the regulations that they are, and the guidelines second. Maybe not a big, you know, substantive issue for the commission and board, but we went from portrait to landscape. Honestly, it is a big thing in terms of readability, and I thought that was a proper next step, and a great recommendation actually from one of the public to simply flip to landscape. We reformatted, and I think it's much more legible. And lastly, big picture item, rather than regulations all up front as it was in previous drafts and guidelines to follow, it's now returned to sections with regulations and guidelines for each section. So for example, building design regulations and guidelines, followed by site design regulations and guidelines, et cetera. You know, might be small things or not something you really notice, but I think it makes a big difference in how you're able to read through the document. Going through, just a note, table of contents is not updated as we continue to refine this. We will, once we have a final document, we will certainly update the table of contents. As we make edits, pages change, and you didn't want to waste time with that. So what I have for you tonight is this document. I thought I would go through page by page, as fast or as slow as you like, giving a summary of each page. I'm happy to go through the document, giving summaries from each page and section, and then returning to those areas that the commission or board or public has questions on. And I'm also certainly happy to stop whenever a question arises as well. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Jim. Thank you very much. Can I ask that, because we do have the changes that are made from the past, would you point, I see that you have them in here in the red and the green and the yellow. Can you point out those as you get to them on there so that people
Absolutely.
know where they've changed from the last review? Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you.
For us as well.
So, excellent. So, as we go through, the first section of this is simply our introduction. It creates a framework for the applicant, for the commission, for the board, for staff to understand how we're utilizing these documents. In this, there was a recommendation to essentially strengthen this sentence here, the first red line you see. It simply reorders that language. It used to state, as part of the Growth Incentive Zone authorization by the Cape Cod Commission, a design and infrastructure plan for the zone is required, and it reorders it to simply state, a design and infrastructure plan is required for the Growth Incentive Zone, as authorized by the Cape Cod Commission. Beyond that, in the green, recommendation was to, again, begin to hint at how these districts interrelate. So, the Unified Design Regulations and Guidelines document furthers the design and infrastructure plan. And again, I'll get into each of the different districts and replaces design standards and creates a consistent standard for the GIZ, the Growth Incentive Zone, and the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District. So as we go, we begin to talk about design features. So we have just a brief introduction on districts and design. We talk in this introductory paragraph of design, there was great recommendations to strengthen language regarding proposed entrances and shop fronts in relationship to the public realm and the neighboring built form. And so that was inserted into that design intro paragraph, as you'll see there. And methods of redevelopment and preservation, there was a recommendation for an introductory statement. So stating there, when considering architectural improvement in downtown Hyannis, consider these 5 forms of redevelopment prior to proposing new construction. So again, this is meant for, if there's an opportunity for preservation or renovation or conservation, I think the town and the commission and the board have stated that they would like to see that at least evaluated before new construction. With that, there was a recommendation for some language strengthening preservation and renovation. Preservation really just adds decades and or centuries is what that's supposed to state, as suggested by Mr. Doherty and your accompanied document. And really, I think that's a great addition there. It really talks about, we're talking about over time as opposed to over the occupants of that building. So that was added. And renovation, it really refers to the edit refers to renovating when appropriate, but not renovate to renovate's sake. Renovate if there's architectural significance and materials used, the compatibility with the surrounding structures. Lacking such commitment, renovation should not be attempted. So we go on to add a common building vocabulary. That was something that, just from a practical standpoint, witnessing many meetings, I thought it would be good reference. That wasn't something that really came up in public comment, but just something that I had noted and I thought would be a valuable addition. So certainly can take public comment and feedback on that as well. moving through, a lot of this historic significance was pulled from our previous document, and we enter into our design jurisdictional review map. And of course, on this sheet, it's a little whitewashed, but this is truly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can we?
Yeah, please go ahead.
On page, my glasses. On page 9, we just scrolled past it, where we have the examples of the right-hand side showing an example of a busy Main Street, which is great, but it actually, I think, is on an open street. It doesn't really have a reflection of what we are today, so my recommendation would be that we use a part of the block on Main Street that does represent our current, I mean, like the Puritan block or Alberto's block, where you can see some of the shops, and you can see there is current parking on that rather than having it as an open street. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Might I suggest that changes, we just keep I'm trying to keep a record of them here, because it might be more than one, and then just go through those at the end, since we know what they are. Is that okay with you? So, I mean, we'll still note it, but this way we accumulate them. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So again, for the commission, the board, and the public, these are our overlapping jurisdictional areas that we're talking about here. So in the red outline, that's the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District. It really encompasses Main Street, the south side, the south side of North Street, along the harbor area, and some of the side streets moving towards the east and the transportation center. The growth incentive zone is a larger district that extends essentially to the airport rotary, to the Yarmouth Town line and down towards the West End rotary. So here we begin jurisdictional review. It outlines, but it does outline the review, the general ordinance for historic properties for the Historic District Commission, and what's applicability is. The Planning Board, similarly, the zoning ordinance that requires submission and concurrence with the design and infrastructure plan. The red lines here, it's actually the similar request that was earlier in the document, talking about as part of the growth incentive zone established by the Cape Cod Commission, a design and infrastructure plan for zone is required, and adjusting that again to a design and infrastructure plan is required as part of the growth incentive zone established by the Cape Cod Commission. A little tweak, but I think it does read better. And additionally, the 2 lines down from that, adding the downtown Hyannis zoning districts make up the growth incentive zone, clarifying that so that it is understand that we're talking about the growth incentive zone boundary, and within that are each of those downtown Hyannis zoning districts. And as you see, the next section, we talk to the downtown Hyannis zoning districts and its applicability. And that applicability there is, I'm sorry, it's easier to read from here. That the planning board shall establish a design and infrastructure plan, which shall be adopted after a public hearing. And so these each have to adhere to the zoning ordinance.
Madam Chair? I just didn't want to go too far out. Would you rather wait till you go through the whole thing, or?
I think let's accumulate, because I think I might have one here as well. Please go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I just didn't know if that would be, okay. Page 12, number B1, where it says the applicant files a date stamp copy of the application for certificate of appropriateness and such. Can we clarify who that is filed with?
We can. I maybe put it in parentheses. This is straight from the ordinance. So I don't want to create an image that we're amending the ordinance by any means, but I could certainly make some comment in this section that is submitted to, to the planning office and stamped copy to the clerk, Aaron? Or not the clerk for? Not the clerk. Yeah, just for planning board, or planning department, excuse me. But I could certainly make a reference in there, absolutely.
I believe that's the current procedure anyway for the date stamped.
Yes,
and
nothing has
nothing's
changed in
changes,
the
yeah.
ordinance at all.
Well, I'm just trying to get a clarification as to who it was filed with. And then on the next page, on page 13, is just a numbering sequence. You have A, 1 and 2, and then you have B, 3 and 4.
Oh, good point.
Should that be B, 1 and 2?
Yes.
Good catch.
Yeah, good catch, thank you. And if anybody else sees anything, you feel free to
Sorry.
just unmute and we'll interrupt and shout it out and keep the list going. Thank you.
Excellent. I would like to come back to page 13 at some stage, and I've just marked it, but I don't need to go there now.
With regard to that same section, it shows that under the planning board section, it shows that their notification is made to the public. Can we also add that to the,
Can you point out what number and letter you're at, please?
maybe, it's on page 14,
Oh,
section B. It was 4, BII. It shows that the planning board notification does go out to the property owners whose properties are 300 feet
oh, I
to
see
the
what you're
subject
talking
property. I think we just want to make sure that they are also notified through all of the changes and proposed projects that are going out.
Do you want to just clarify how you would like that to read, so that we understand exactly what, if you could just clarify that? So II, prior to the formal site plan review meeting.
Right, to add to, I'll get back to that because I can't even read my note.
Not a problem. And I will just note, though, that
Okay. I just
that
wanna make sure that
section,
it's on both
again, for the
sections.
planning board, that is a reference to our zoning ordinance to illustrate that for a special permit, the planning board is a special permit granting authority within the growth incentive zone. And so any application within that requires a special permit goes to the planning board, and those are the requirements within the zoning. So it's just outlining what the requirements are today in the ordinance.
And that language is just lifted right from the ordinance.
Yeah, 'cause
exactly
there's no
right.
changes that I can tell from that. Okay. I think we're on design standards review applicability, or?
Yes, thank you. So here, so historically, so design standards review applicability, sorry. We have two sections. We have administrative review under Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District and the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Commission review. The administrative review historically has been if, and it states it towards the bottom here, if does not involve substantial change in design, material, color, or the outward appearance for compliance with this document, replacement shall be in kind in size, color, and material. So practically speaking, if someone comes in and wants to replace a window on Main Street that is the exact same color, material, and size, that is administratively reviewed. I don't believe that we really have anything codified there or in our design regulations that states such. So this section was added a while ago. And I noted there that adding appointed by the chair. And so my thought process here is, practically speaking, potentially annually, the commission could take up the act of appointing someone to review this administratively. That could be staff, that could be the chair, that could be, you could appoint another member. How that would operate is if someone were to come in, want to do just as I had mentioned, if it's the chair, I could simply send an email saying this is what's requested, what do you think? And if it's administratively approvable, we could offer that. And really that just speeds up the time and effort for those that are making routine maintenance improvements to Main Street, and also doesn't require a hearing and fees associated with that.
I believe that's actually what we did for the group that went around, formulated to go around and do the walk around and identify things. That worked.
Jim, if you wouldn't mind me just jumping in here, with the administrative review, would it also be prudent to add in there about maybe minor modifications to previously approved projects or projects that were granted a certificate of appropriateness from the Historic District Commission? For something that was approved, a minor mod of a window or some sort of layout change?
Certainly could consider. I think historically speaking, the commission has requested the applicant come back to discuss that. We could certainly have that conversation, but to date, I don't think we've really had that conversation. It's been more of, please come back, we'll review it, and they reviewed it in a fairly timely manner, in my opinion.
I think that's always worked. When there's things that didn't quite meet code, we would suggest to the applicant that they contact planning, work with planning, come back in 2 weeks to the next meeting and see if we can make it work. And I'd say 99% of the time that happens and it gets approved. So that
So with that there, again, the applicability, the standard applicability that stands today for the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District still stands today. That's just lifted and placed in. For the planning board, again, this is within the growth incentive zone.
Jim, sorry,
Yep.
one quick thing. Appointed by the chair, but also voted upon by the commission, or just appointed by the chair? Would you want to add appointed by the chair and voted upon by the commission, or
I think that's fair.
just to put it to a vote by the commission?
Yeah, I think
That's-
that's fine.
Everyone aware of that?
I think
Okay.
that's fine.
All right.
Thank you. Yep.
I think what happened before is I asked if anyone was interested in doing that, and the right number of hands went up. So
Isn't it nice when that happens, yeah?
So continuing on, again, so the planning board, so this is design standard review applicability. Right now, we have administrative review and planning board review. Again, within the growth incentive zone, the planning board is the special permit granting authority. So any special permit that is required goes to the planning board for a public hearing. They are also the lead negotiator for all regulatory agreements. Administratively reviewed, any application that doesn't require a special permit is within the growth incentive zone, so it's allowed by right. It meets the zoning, is administratively reviewed by either planning or building to confirm that it is in fact meets the zoning and is allowed by right. It may require site plan review or something other than planning board review, but this would be for the growth incentive zone. This would be the 2 steps for the planning board. So how do we use, so this is all just an introductory to date. So now we're to how do we actually using these design standards. So the design added in, again, was an introductory sentence. The design standards consist of both regulations, which are mandatory, and guidelines, which are advisory. The guidelines are preferred recommendations regarding proposed projects for the matters which are outside the scope of applicable regulations. So through there was an added flow chart that seeks to help the applicant and the reviewing agency or body as to what the process may be for each and every application.
Jim, just one thing. It's just an aesthetic thing.
Yep.
Any chance that diagram could be a full page?
Absolutely. So that's one of those things where we tweaked around and we said, well, maybe we can make it fit in this page, but you're probably right.
It's beautiful. It's a
Yeah.
masterpiece, and I want to see it bigger.
Yep.
half the people up here are wearing glasses,
Yeah.
so I think it's a good request.
Absolutely. We can make that a full page. Not a problem.
Good idea.
All right. So we're finally getting into regulations and guidelines here. Thank you for hanging with me. So in our building design regulations, This has gone through several iterations. But one question kind of came out each and every time is, well, when does this apply? And so we started to try and add some additional language in there here and there that kind of hinted towards these things. So building form, for instance, we've added, proposed buildings and additions so they fit in with the existing building constructed at a time when developers and businesses build smaller footprint buildings, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we're talking about here is building form. So it's important to remember that, again, if an applicant came to you with a window and it's not the same material, not the same size, not the same color, they wanted to make something completely different kind of window, we're very likely, the commission's not reviewing for building form, very likely not reviewing for, parking requirements. They're looking at what window treatments are allowed, potentially the fenestration requirements. But not all of this document will apply to every application. It's going to be an application by application review. And so it's I think, an important document to have where we can now start pointing to specifics, whereas in our current, in my opinion, in our current design standards for both the commission and for the planning board, we didn't really have that thing to point to say that, for instance, A1, the facade of any building greater than 100 feet in width must be divided vertically by a recess or an offset of 7 feet. And I'll just stop there because now I'm sitting there, I'm looking at that building, and I'm saying, hey, is it greater than 100 feet? And if so, are you recessed 7 feet? And we're starting to build that formula here. We're starting to build these standards. And I will say that, certainly we can continue on having more conversations, and maybe there's other things that we can pull into this, and there's maybe lessons learned that we can look back on from other projects too. But I think, this is starting to create that document that we can truly have a thorough review, I think, on building, on site, up and down Main Street and the surrounding area. So with that, so we have the building form, and we continue on. We tried to, I'll note here that there are several additional diagrams and pictures that have been added. That was one thing, again, it might not seem like a big deal, but to the reader, a lot of the public comment was, well, what are we trying to truly say here? And, picture seemed to help that quite a bit. So something as simple as this right here, we're talking about trim and the treatment that is required and the quality that we're looking for. So right here, we're just talking about a simple J-channel siding trim. So that little J that you see on the edge there, we're asking for, we're stating that's prohibited, and that proper trim is required. So, and we go into the trim board that is required. So this is just an example of just an image that you'll start seeing throughout this document that we try to start building those discussion points. Color. So color, we wanted to get a little more specific. The Historic Commission probably knows quite well that every application met the color chart because every color was in the color chart. And so one of the things that started from day one was we have to get a better color chart. And I think this group actually truly did take time and effort to figure out exactly what you wanted in terms of that color chart. The color chart's in the appendix. It's 11 colors. We take it from much of the surrounding area, mostly Nantucket, and we state that those colors shall be adhered to. However, so again, all these can be waived. So anyone can come in and say, hey, commission, I can't meet this. I'm asking for a waiver. And it's up to the commission to determine whether that waiver should be granted. Now, we give a little bit more specificity here for colors because of, I think, maybe our past history with colors. So we have that appendix of those 11 colors that are required. If they want a waiver, we offer them the next step, which is the Historic New England Paint Colors of America, which is broken down into periods. Your period-appropriate colors, and they can search through those colors. and come to you with a narrative as to why it's important to seek these colors as opposed to those 11 colors.
Jim, one quick question.
Yep.
In the appendix, it says different shades of white can be used. Does that just mean any shades of white as long as they're different?
So yes, we're
Just,
different shades of white can be for the body of the building, trim and sash. Yes, so we haven't in the past overly regulated white. White has been a preferred and allowed color to date. We can get into specifics if we want to, but that is how we've treated, or how the commission has treated in the past at least.
If you've been to a paint store recently, there's about 1,000 paint chips of white, and all the rest of the colors fit over here. Yeah.
So continuing on, so I do note, I just want to, before I gloss over this, so we're talking about building design regulation and guidelines, and what we've talked to date, the building design regulations. So those are the things that they need to come to you and say they meet these regulations, each one of them, these 3 or 4 pages. And, that's something that I think once adopted, we can create that checklist for an applicant, for the commission. So we say, they've gone through the regulations and they check the box on every one of them, or they don't, and here's the narrative why they are asking for relief. The guidelines are now not as specific as you have to, but these are the suggested requirements that we're hoping that every single one achieves. And so under building form, we begin with the massings here. So we already have massings in building form and regulations, and now we continue on with that discussion. And it was requested by Mr. Doherty in one of his comments, and that he provided, that we remove this line here. So in this, we talk about 0 lot lines are encouraged for buildings fronting on Main Street. And so, again, this is, again, a guideline. So we're encouraging it, so that historic pattern of growth on Main Street, right up on the sidewalk. But we're not requiring it, because there's certainly areas in which a setback may be prudent. And so how Mr. Doherty had requested, I edit this, is to remove the requirement for between Ocean Street and C Street as defined in the zoning ordinance, and that zoning ordinance talks about that specific area and 0 lot line, and that being for commercial on the first floor. And so Mr. Doherty stated he would like to treat the Main Street the same in his comment, and so he asked to strike that line. The images just below that are added. So this refers to demonstrating preferred methods of visually dividing masses. So as you see on the left side, obviously a very flat, sunk-in facade treatment, whereas something to the right is the gables with the L's and a lot of character involved in that. Continuing on, just a slight tweak to adding a little description to tall parapets. Disproportionately tall parapets was, I think, it's, again, a small thing, but it's something that gives the commission a little bit more description to fall back on. And we touch on an image here shortly. There we are. We added an image there. Another series of images highlighting preferred treatments on siding. Excuse me. And again, the differences in treatments or different materials. This is actually not a new image. So as we move through this, not a number of red lines, but just talking through it, we're talking about fenestration, window types, windows, preferred treatments that you do like, preferred treatments that you don't. These 2/2, for example, as one. Talk about different kinds of glazing, frontage zones. We talk about frontage zones in depth in our zoning ordinance, and so we try and pull some of that language out there, and how the frontage types interact with the public realm. some stuff, or excuse me, some images of front facades that, or aluminum storefront types that are preferred, and other storefront types that are preferred and those that aren't. You know, it might be somewhat confused as to what is what, but in the left side, as this was actually one of our early comments from our working group as we were walking through Main Street, is, you know, the bright aluminum systems were, in the opinion of the group, not as attractive as those dark colors. And so not eliminating aluminum storefront systems, because there are other benefits, but the proper treatments were noted early and carried forward in this document. Adding lighting specificity to this document, adding some images to it that the commission recommended. Continuing on through parking requirements, some more images, parking behind the buildings, proper screening for parking, proper vegetation for parking, you know, the use of pervious pavers potentially. You know, that's one thing where, yes, it is design, historic and design standards, but also if we can work in some environmentally friendly options, certainly always interested in adding those, you know, reducing stormwater runoff, water quality opportunities, always a good thing. Continuing on, obviously trying to add some site amenities where possible, pedestrian walkways. Sorry, go through, try not to.
Jim, can I ask a quick,
Yep, no, absolutely.
ask a quick question? Just wanted to clarify in my head. So I'm looking at the stuff, obviously, the site amenities and the landscape design and the parking lot regulations and guidelines and all that. I believe, I could be wrong, but I thought that was not a HHDC purview situation. So even though we're seeing these regulations, should it come to an HHDC meeting, are we supposed to consider these now when it comes to appropriateness and all that? Or is that still something that's not in our purview that we don't get involved with?
Right, so it's important to remember we have two parties in this room here.
Right.
So we have the Planning Board and the Historic Commission. And so, yes, for Historic Commission, if there is something that comes to you that completely enhances the site amenities of it, you're looking at those site amenities. So like the lampposts, for instance, looking at those qualities, the bike racks, for instance, looking at those qualities. Planning boards has, you know, a different discretion and review, but certainly you can look at certain things and say, what is the architectural quality of it? So, you know, you're right. It's important for the Historic Commission to stay within their purview, and this hopefully is all encompassing to allow for that, and also incorporate all the review requirements for the Planning Board.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yes, Commissioner Kern.
I would echo that comment from Commissioner Matthews. I had that whole section from after B, site amenities, section 5. It just didn't seem like that should be part of our regulations. I think if there's considerations as people are looking at it from a historic standpoint, we run into trouble with what the definition of an enlivening the pathway is, or what people use for their outside patios and such like that. I think what we've been successful at is when people have come before the commission looking to add those amenities outside, they have that as their proposal, you know, not just, well, it says in the guideline, this is enlivening the pedestrian walkway. So I would like to recommend that we don't have that as a guideline going forward, because it should be something that is always approved. And, you know, again, it's discretionary and it's subjective to what we want to have in the historic, like inflatable items outside and things like that. So I would suggest that we take that out of a guideline and designs. That would be my suggestion.
Just to clarify, you're suggesting taking out section 5?
Section 5B.
5B, outbuildings and garages.
The A is fine. Primary walkways linking site features shall be a minimum of 5 feet wide. That was in one of the original
But the,
drafts.
The regulations.
yeah, 5B is on outbuildings and garages.
Maybe 5AB.
A subset.
I'm sorry,
A
A.
subset.
The greatest-
A, sorry,
not the
A,
greatest
Okay,
numbering.
sub B,
Let's see, I'm having a public comment.
page 37.
37.
30.
47 or 30, 37?
37.
It's 38 on this
38.
page. On
Yep.
the-
Yeah, 38.
Oh, sorry.
That's
On-
okay.
On the new one, it's 38.
I think that, I think it covers some of the things that we have been dealing with, and I think it was at our discretion. So I personally think it should stay in because it addresses some items that keep coming back as well. It's open to interpretation also, but how do the other commissioners feel about that?
That doesn't bother me. A subset B is fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about Commissioner Clark? And I apologize for missing you before. You're hiding behind Commissioner Matthews.
I'd like to clarify, I'm not hiding, I'm just sitting here. Looks fine to me, thank you.
Jim,
Yes, sir.
if you're talking about the parking lot areas too, the guidelines seem to be silent on like
No.
canopied solar parking. Not that it's, you mentioned solar above in the guidelines, but I think I don't have a particular opinion of it, but if people don't like it, here's your chance to not see it. Just a suggestion.
That's a good point. We don't speak to that.
And there's some pretty healthy incentives that are coming down the pipe to do that.
To take it out or leave it in?
Oh, to put it in.
For
To add it, to add it.
Maintain it.
To add it to as many places as you can add it.
yeah, so solar panels over parking spaces.
Yeah, you
and
see them around
structures
town.
Oh,
in
yeah.
parking lots.
Yeah, it was,
Place in Sandwich.
Christ,
Yeah.
one of the churches has it. The parking areas at the county fair have it now. Some of the parking areas at the county fair have it.
Certainly, I don't think that would look good in the downtown area.
I guess, yeah, if this is a chance, if we want to discourage that sort of, type of, that look, then I think this is a point where we should mention it.
Could certainly put
I
that
agree.
in.
So leave it in so that it leaves it to discretion
Or-
to protect it.
Or you
Mention
could-
it somehow.
Yeah, you could just say
there.
that canopy, solar canopy arrays over parking lots are highly discouraged,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's pretty simple.
As a guideline.
As a guideline, not a
Yeah.
regulation, yeah,
I
as a
agree.
guideline, right?
Which
agree.
we have done, like with aluminum, it's discouraged. Yeah.
Yeah, Jim, we make a note on that one.
So
Absolutely.
leave it in. Are you okay with that reasoning, Commissioner Cronin?
Pardon?
You okay with that reasoning?
Yeah, I'll go with what the commission wants to do.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim, continue along. I think we're on 38, 39.
Thank you. One moment. Let me get back to that. Oh, okay. All right, so we're still in landscaping, and this touches on trying to get native landscaping throughout for any new landscaping in the area. Continuing on, this red line here for lighting discusses night lighting, illuminated pedestrian walkways is encouraged. That's something that we heard quite a bit about, Main Street and the surrounding area at night. So any attempt to try and illuminate that for not just aesthetics, but safety. One question that I have here, that this is my only question, I believe, in the document that I've had some conflicting public comment on, was wrought iron fencing is appropriate and related iron gates should be painted black. So there was a discussion at one point, and we had inserted it back in. But I do have recollection of a lot of conversations about whether or not it's appropriate is it consistent with downtown Hyannis? So looking for guidance from the commission and board on that.
Well, and I will say too, we have a lot of public here this evening, and that's one thing that I'd love to hear from the public on. Absolutely,
So-
that sounds good.
We can certainly come back to that question later.
Do you have any ideas why it was controversial? I'm just trying to understand what might have been an issue.
From the public feedback that I received, it's just it wasn't consistent with what's downtown Hyannis, what has been seen in downtown Hyannis. That doesn't mean it can't be as part of the future fabric of Hyannis, but just food for thought. We can come back to that one.
And historic Boston has wrought iron fencing everywhere.
I think my question was going to be just like that, Jack, can we say what kind of wrought iron fencing we're talking about? If we're talking about straight lines and stuff like that looks a little modern, that's one thing. But if you look at the beautiful historic wrought iron fencing that is in areas like downtown Boston or whatever, that's pretty nice.
And there are a few commercial spots, I believe, on Main Street that do have some version of wrought iron fencing, but certainly can come back to that.
Great.
Continuing on, site amenities, again, just adding, some guidelines for furnishings.
Could I just
Yep.
go back to, let's see, section 7B, sub B, C, D. Some of the, again, just going through some of the controversy that we've had in having items, what's appropriate, not appropriate in the historic district. And I think when you get into those areas of integrating art and other items into the designs, it tends to think that anything is acceptable as long as it's, considered historic or, it's an art, public art. And I think if we could try to get it so that, yes, those things could be accepted, but it must be all approved through the Historic Commission and not have it just be something that is part of the design as a regulation and guideline, because in some places they're not appropriate, and sometimes you really want to make sure that you're looking at the whole, project and not just incorporating them.
So can I ask you to clarify what you would like to see on there?
With section B, celebrate and corporate community identity. Section B, sub B, integrate public art into designs of parks or public places and its surroundings. Again, we've gotten some other items that have come before us, and I think I'd like to see that continue to come before us and not be part of an approved guideline or regulation for the historic district. Because a lot of these items you looked at to consider, but you also have to look at it from the historic proportion. Otherwise, it's an accepted guideline or regulation rather than something that should be before us.
How do the other commissioners feel about that?
My interpretation of this was that whatever piece of art that they wanted to put in any kind of public space would come to us anyway, that we would have a chance to make a comment on or to review. So I understand what you're saying. You want to make sure it's still reviewable to us, but I'm assuming that that's still going to happen when everything comes down to us. That's my assumption anyway.
If I could ask Jim to clarify that, but that's how I read it as well.
Yes, I mean, again, so the regulation, the guidelines are for the commission when reviewing an application. So if an art installation were to come before the commission, the commission would consider these guidelines as well as the planning board if there was, a large scale project with site plan review or a special permit review.
My experience is that the things that have come before us is that we've been pretty diligent in trying to keep an open mind, what is still historical. We had one not too long ago where I think we had an entire page, was it like 19 items be adhered to try to make sure it stayed, within the historical. And so my personal opinion is that as long as it still comes before us so that we can protect what's in our purview, that it's covered on that.
Yeah, I agree.
Are other commissioners okay with that?
Yeah.
Commissioner Clark, and I apologize, I didn't mean to say anything wrong before when I said hi, I just apologize for not seeing you before, sorry. Okay, so, does that address it? Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so I think we're good.
So continuing on, we go to the sign section. As both groups know, we didn't really dive too deep into signage at this time. There's a secondary scope to evaluate kind of comprehensively because it's really a different application that the commission has to deal with routinely. We did try to begin to move in my opinion, the right direction. We have lifted, it looks like a number of edits, but really all what we did was we lifted this language and brought it to the top. And what the top says is all signs are to be three-dimensionally wood or PVC unless waived by the commission. And really what this is what you guys want is up front, and what is kind of limiting or prohibited is down below. So setting it up for success, hopefully. This is what the commission wants, and hopefully they can provide that to you. We did also add some different graphics, making sure to get in that LED open sign that is kind of a recurring theme for us, and making sure that everyone's aware that it's not allowed. Again, adding some other images, the storefront with the obscured windows.
That one's beautiful.
Yeah,
34 is very nice.
Yeah, I think is one that we want to hopefully be able to limit in the future.
Jim, I
Yes.
just had one question on the signage before we move on from it. Each property shall be limited to one freestanding sign. That's referring to, is that too limiting? When you refer to freestanding, can you define that?
Sorry, I hope I'm not making people dizzy. Freestanding, yeah, so it's defined, but this is a freestanding sign. So I understand what you're saying in terms of again, it's very place-based. Everything that we do here is place-based, and we're talking about downtown Hyannis. I don't think one freestanding sign is too limited, in my opinion. I agree if we're talking about old Kmart Plaza, maybe so, or a large box store plaza or something like that. But we're talking about downtown Hyannis, and I think high quality signage is something at least I know this commission has been striving for a while, and appropriate size signage too. So we have a recent restaurant that I think did a phenomenal job on there that we wanted to make sure to include, and I'm sure there's others out there as well.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, Jim, just to piggyback on Steve's question, I'm assuming that doesn't overly burden wayfinding signs or parking signage or, park this way, entrance this way. It's
Correct.
just really the main staple sign delineating a property.
That's correct, yes. And actually, wayfinding signage is something that we're actually trying to achieve more so. That's a big thing for downtown Hyannis right now. And then other items, and I believe I have it.
Can we go back for one more question?
Oh, yep.
On the molded plastic A-frame signs prohibited, what about the metal or the wood A-frame signs?
Yeah, we have that here, don't we? Let's see.
Yeah, that's in there.
Or is it, okay.
Yep.
Yep, so you're allowed A-frame sign. Signs must be made of wood, metal, or other quality materials, though all
awesome.
A-frame signs. And so one thing that's not in red, but at the very bottom of that A-frame sign, and you'll see in a couple of these sections, is brought in at the close of business. That was a comment that we received, and I think makes sense. Let's see, and then, similarly with electronic signage turned off at the close of business. And there's our appendix of colors. And with that, I will turn it back to Board Commission for any other comments, questions, and certainly happy to hear from the public as well.
I have one question.
Fire away.
On page 19, EFS is prohibited. I want to know why EFS is prohibited, and because if it's properly done, you couldn't tell it from stucco. But ephes doesn't crack like stucco does, and it gives you an R value that really increases the energy consumption in a building. What's the history with ephes?
Yeah, so that was a recommendation, I believe, from our architect in discussions with our in-house architect. But you know, that was a recommendation of kind of a lower quality, but perhaps if done right, it may not necessarily need to be prohibited. We maybe could put it to a regulation or a guideline if you feel strongly on that. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's this balancing act of historic design standards versus, you know, things that we can facilitate, you know, energy efficiencies. Certainly.
Well, typical stucco is a three-layer process with a lot of metal lath and scratch and brown and color coat. Ephes is a foam base that gets covered with fiberglass roving, and then it's fiberglassed on the outside, and you get the same texture and color, but it's indestructible. We use it on the West Coast on schools and all kinds of public buildings because the kids can't mar it, and it gives us a huge Title 24 value for. I'm just surprised to see that it's outlawed when it's a good product.
What about it from a design standpoint? Do you feel it hits the mark with the kind of design aesthetic of the downtown historic area?
Well, if you do it correctly, you can't tell the difference because it gets the exact same texture that the final coat on the stucco wall gets. But you don't have any of the expansion and contraction problems and none of the cracking, and it's a much more durable thing. And it's a very energy efficient system.
If it could be, you know, articulated the proper way to do it, then certainly
Yeah.
something that could be looked at.
I'm gonna-
Any other comments, Tim?
I'm going to throw this one thing in there. Stucco is not one of our traditional on-Cape materials. There are historic structures around that have stucco facades, but it's not one of the predominant features of our historic buildings and our historic architecture.
Well, that was my thought too.
It's a lot of building elements are stuccoed or, you know, eavesed. Different elements, pilasters around foundations, but it's not typically seen on Cape as the predominant, feature, the predominant appearance.
That was my initial reaction as well. I think, you know, clapboard and shingles, and I think that might have been more the reason why it was considered be prohibited. Any other comments, commissioners?
I've used it several times in historic districts, in the classic Tory chimney. We've done it many times in ephes, and I defy anyone to tell me we didn't. You can't tell. It's the same stuff. So,
Yeah, and actually the exterior insulation finish system, with somehow these building codes are changing with exterior insulation, it's going to be a lot more prominent, especially in our wood frame structures. So that term can be problematic because a lot of different types of systems can suddenly be kind of classified as an exterior finish insulation system, kind of all encompassing. So there's some problems with that term, you know, that where it could be miscategorizing other things that we do want to see. But I mean, I don't know how the other board or how this board feels. You know, I think there are great guidelines in here, emphasizing, you know, lots of, you know, shingle, clapboard, traditional masonry elements. So maybe it's kind of, you know, covers it. There is a problem maybe with that term eaves. But you know, the guideline in the document is encouraging tasteful use of masonry elements and tasteful use of wood siding. So I think it kind of can cover that if that, maybe that term being removed and replaced with, I don't know, something that, we don't want to see.
May I offer, you know, we could simply move this to a guideline and reference it as the ephes may be considered with care of installation or something to that effect.
I was going to say the same thing. Maybe it could be moved to a guideline with that kind of addendum to it,
think it's an
Yeah,
excellent
I
idea.
like
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
like that.
Or if you use the term stucco or modern stucco equivalent, right, that eliminates you from the traditional method. You can still use like the newer latex modified materials, that sort of stuff. Again, you can't tell the difference if you touch it, stand next to it, it looks the same.
Yeah, I think that's a great solution. Thank you for that.
And just to clarify, someone would use that because it's a less expensive way to decorate their building? Is that why you would use that kind of a product?
Like,
Yeah, you might see it in like window insets of like an older building, like below a storefront window. They
Okay.
might have stuccoed like the interior panels of that, right? That's one application that you probably, I bet you there's somewhere around here has it.
Gotcha, okay.
30, 40 years ago, it was really prominent in commercial construction. If you think of like the side of the Kmart building,
Yeah.
large masonry walls or the side of the Staples Plaza, kind of, a lot of it can kind of come out of a chopper gun and just get splattered all over the place, whereas a traditional stucco is hand applied and hewn. So that's where it kind of gets a bad connotation because it's associated with that type of kind of architecture and building.
Gotcha.
It's great.
Thank you for the clarification.
Well, Jim, great job. You put a lot of work into this. Very much appreciated. Matt?
I have one other question. So just because, years down the road when these projects come in, I just want to, I'm looking at page 16, and I'll just throw this out to the greater committee here because I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So it says how to use these design regulations, and it notes the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Design Regulations. These regulations are requirements for all applications of the Historic Main Street Waterfront Historic District and shall be adhered to unless specifically waived by the commission, right? So very clear. Downtown Hyannis Design Guidelines. These following guidelines are recommendations for all applicants within the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District. Additionally, the guidelines are recommended for all new developments and redevelopment with the exception of single-family residences in the growth incentive zone and shall be considered by the planning board for applications seeking zoning relief by the planning department for all as-of-right projects. Now, if I am to bring in a project in the growth incentive zone that is not in the Main Street Waterfront Historic District, is the planning board subject to building design regulations as noted below? Are we enforcing that? I just want to be clear, right?
So the planning board is not the enforcement authority when it's not a special permit or a regulatory agreement, for instance.
Right.
So if a building permit is being requested that is a by right project.
Right.
We, practically speaking, as it operates today, there's many building permits that are requested within the growth incentive zone, probably several daily.
Yep.
That get sent to the planning and development staff and the building department, and we review to confirm that they meet the guidelines per the recommendation. We can then, in terms of the guidelines that are before us here, and we can offer our opinions on suggested alternatives. It's a by right project, meaning it's not required.
Right.
So if you're outside of the historic district, so Barnstable Road, for instance, if they are replacing their roof and they want to put solar panels on their roof, I can point to this and say we have a solar guideline that says, collective, similar color, here's my recommendations, and I offer those comments back. Not requirement, though.
But if it was a special permit project that required special permit from the planning board and it was not in the historic district, the way I read this, that's why I want to be clear. So are we then subject to reviewing that comes before the planning board, and one of the regulations we're reviewing, is it in fact these regulations? Because that's what my interpretation would be of this.
Correct.
Okay.
If you have a special permit before the planning board,
Right.
You're holding this up and saying,
But
this
not
doesn't
in the
meet this.
historic district.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
Exactly
Thank you.
right.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful to, where it says building design regulations, it says applicable to all projects in the Hyannis Historic Waterfront District, and projects, requiring special permit action by the planning board are all subject to this I think it should be abundantly clear that we're applying these two standards inside or outside the historic district. So that's the whole intent here, is to get uniformity, right? So, okay.
I like that very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I absolutely
No
can add
question there.
a line to that.
But it's a little like, I'd slide through and say, well, I don't know, I'm not in it with it,
Yeah,
I could-
I agree with that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That's
Yeah.
why we're here.
It's what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Exactly, and yeah, again, practically speaking, there could be a time where there's a special permit before the planning board and has to go to historic, and so having the same document is pretty key.
Yeah.
I agree. So it's really, have we enforced it properly? Before, I mean, I don't, if anyone else has anything, but before we go to public comment, there's a few things I just wanted to highlight.
Thank
that
you.
all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so just to go back, there was a correction on page 5 where you had centuries. Commissioner Cronin had mentioned on page 30 the photos, wanted those to be a little bit more in keeping with historic. Page 13. I think we managed to get to that. Nope, we just answered that question. And as Commissioner Cronin had mentioned, the B, there was the part where there was the 1 and 2. And you had asked Jim about the iron. You wanted to come back to it on the consensus with regard to black or whatever else on the iron. It had also been mentioned stucco or modern equivalent, just to bring up to where we are. And go back to the black iron, but I had one question of my own. Everything else seems to have been answered. And that was on the paper that you gave us for the changes, where it has page 20. You see where it goes A, building form, and above that, it's treating Main Street differently from Ocean Street. But I don't see that before. On page 21, it has building form, but before that, I don't have treating Main Street differently between Ocean and C Streets. And that may have just been your own commentary on that, because the way it reads makes no sense to me.
I'm sorry, I wasn't following.
The page 20, where you marked page 20 on the bottom of that page?
It's 21 on this,
Oh, yeah,
Jim.
sorry.
Yeah, it's 21 on that for the next part, but the bit before it, it says treating Main Street differently, is that just your commentary, or did you want that in there? Actually.
Oh, no, sorry, that was, Mr. Doherty provided comments
So
that's,
I just
that
want
was
to make
his
sure I understood
commentary,
that.
not that it
because it
needs
was-
to be included.
I wanted to make sure that I
I
understood
don't want to
that
speak for him
correctly.
either.
So I think I got all that. So the only other thing that I had marked down that you wanted to find out was if the commission had any preference on the color of iron, and then maybe go to public comment? Or staff report? How do commissioners feel about the color of the iron? I know I've seen some green.
Wrought iron is black, isn't it? That's the color?
What was that?
Wrought iron fencing, that's black fencing, correct? The color is black?
It's usually
Yeah.
painted black, but then sometimes it rusts and it goes brown and gray
Oh,
and all
well.
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Again,
What
I
color do
think,
we want it?
I think the decorative black wrought iron fencing is beautiful. I have no problem with that. Like I said, the more modern straight lines, maybe that's a little bit too modern, but
The decorative is fine.
the ones that are decorated, yeah, I think they're beautiful.
I would agree.
I do agree as well.
So a consensus to leave it in?
Is that a
There's
consensus,
consensus
both
there.
Yes.
commissions?
Anyone opposed? Yeah, there's consensus there.
Yeah, consensus. You got your answer.
There we go. So, I think there are likely some areas that board members may want to dive a little bit deeper. One for myself is windows. Do we want to do that kind of deep dive now, or do we want to go to public comment and do that after public comment?
Can I suggest we go to public comment and then go for a staff, summation of everything before we go into that?
Sure.
Without that sound?
I think this would be a great time to go to public comment, which might help, lead our discussion after that.
I agree.
Great. The hearing is open, so we'll now go to public comment. If any members of the public would like to make comment, please come forward at this time. Say your name for the record. And Jim, do we have a sign-in sheet?
We do.
Perfect. Sign in. Name for the record, and welcome. Thank you.
Hi, Roberta Mock, 80 Greenwood Ave. I may ask questions that are out of the purview, forgive me for my ignorance, but I think this is a great team.
Could I just ask you to bring that mic a little bit down towards you so we can hear you a little bit? Like just bend the mic?
Do you want me to repeat what I just
Like
said?
bend it down right, there you go, right toward you. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we have a great team here. I'm glad that everyone's working on this. It's so important for our town. And what I said is, I may ask questions that may be out of purview. Forgive me for my inexperience in town affairs. One thing that came to my mind was that diagram that's on page 16. I feel like it's too general. I'm looking at the point about the demolition. And I had brought this up one time before, that I felt that there needs to be more attention to demolition, architectural salvage. I don't know what other towns do, but do we have any guidelines set for when we have such a historical building that where the vault came over from Nantucket at 307 Main Street? There's so much in there that needs to be attended to as far as salvage, because there's a lot of history in that building, and I just don't want it to be left to the discretion of the new owner.
I just wanted to state one thing real quick. This is a public comment session, not a question and answer, so we're not really going to field questions. But, Jim, if you did want to jump in at any time, please feel free.
That was one thing I thought, that this diagram deserves a page of its own, and I also feel that demolition, I felt that this diagram was a little general, and there could be more details in that diagram. That's how I felt about it. Okay, let's see. Okay, well, I don't know. My thought is open space. It always goes back to open space. And the regulation and guidelines of open space per property as a capacity limit, is that anything that is something that is in the purview of this meeting? Is one thing that came to my mind. Again, I'm a little bit overwhelmed with the overdensity that seems to be encroaching upon downtown Main Street, and it concerns me greatly. And I just hope that we take the time to think about our rules and regulations on open space, how it affects people that are living in that area. Maybe there's light pollution that maybe they won't be able to sleep because we're changing the part of downtown to be more residential. And I think these are details we have to consider, open space, and that we're making it. Anyway, I move on to roof. Are we allowing gardens on roof? Is that something that has been thought of or considered in the area, since we have residential who, if they have pets and so forth, what will they have that feels more like what I have as far as nature and gardening and so forth? What's going to be allowed? Is that something that has been thought about? I don't know. It's one thought I had. And then the stormwater treatment. With the higher density, are we really looking at, since we're going into a period of more flooding? I mean, I was pretty shocked when Baxter's parking lot was flooded last year. And I just think that who knows what's coming our way. Let's make sure that whatever we do plan with the density, that we're taking that into consideration. We don't need any boats floating down Main Street, right? All right. What else? I may be leaving things out. I like what you're doing here. I love that you care about downtown Main Street and bringing it back to life with the thought of keeping it historical and paying attention to detail of window treatment. I'm talking about the kind of windows you see in historical Boston where they have, it's not just a square window. I think we can get a lot accomplished here by having good rules in design. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, very much appreciated. Thank you. If anybody else would like to speak, please come on down to the podium, state your name for the record, sign in. Good evening, welcome.
Give me a moment to sign in, please.
Take your time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So, good evening, all of you. Thank you very much for your service to our community. Your work is very important. Thanks also to everybody watching on TV and all the guests and others represented in the room. My name is Kathy Ledeck. Do you want street address? I don't know if you need that.
Village is fine.
Okay, I live in the town of Barnstable, Barnstable Village. I'm a year-round resident there. Prior to moving here, I spent more than 25 years as a leader in my prior community, bringing my perspective as a Hispanic woman, working with the Comprehensive Plan and Urban Design Guidelines in Fairfax County, Virginia. I moved here just a couple of years ago. Fairfax County is a short distance from the metropolitan Washington, D.C. area. They were involved in a rewrite of their comprehensive plan and the establishment of these similar urban design guidelines 4 to 6 years ago, and I was involved in the committees helping to rewrite those documents and to prepare them. I tell you this in the hope that you are keen to learn from the experiences of others, ultimately avoiding repeating mistakes made in other regions. The challenge in Fairfax County 10 years ago is the same challenge that you're facing today. When developers bring development projects for your consideration, they were not able to grasp the specific details of what we wanted to see. So there was a lot of back and forth, lots of committee meetings, lots of delaying of decisions. Time equals money. So it becomes very expensive for these developers to go back to the drawing board, rework their projects, bring them back in, more questions, rework them again. It becomes very expensive, and then the development community is not really interested in coming to us. We want to make sure that these urban design guidelines are clearly describing what it is that we really want to see. The unified design guidelines that you're drafting for the community can really help describe those details for them. I urge you to consider linking these design guidelines with the rewrite of the local comprehensive plan, which is going on right now, as you probably know. Not coordinating with that process is a big mistake that will result in conflicts with the plans. When a developer is reviewing and preparing their development project to bring to you, if there's a conflict in the plans, again, there's going to be a lot of back and forth. Time equals money. They're going to be a little bit unhappy about the fact that we were conflicting in our language in the plans. So I really urge you to link these urban design guidelines to the comprehensive plan and participate in that process as much as you can to inform the rewrite of the comprehensive plan. So when I'm looking here at the dais today, I see the Historic Commission, I see the Planning Board. I don't see anybody here from the Conservation Commission. All of your decisions that you're making here, design guidelines that you're coming up with, impact our environment and our natural resources. I'm talking about things like stormwater management, talking about expanding on the concepts of the streetscape with respect to trees in particular. I have a very specific interest in ensuring that the urban design guidelines include recommendations for the streetscape. When you drive along many of the streets in this district area for the Hyannis Unified Design Guidelines, there's not a whole lot of street trees. Why is that? Because it's not described as part of the public realm and required as part of the public realm. I'm very interested in making sure that landscaping and trees are included in the public realm. I recommend including a section in these guidelines describing these natural elements or green infrastructure, not just in passing, but you need a specific section to describe that. So this is a copy of the urban design guidelines from Fairfax County that I worked on. It's more than 300 pages for 6 villages. So we have 7 villages here in the town of Barnstable. I don't want you to stop your work with these urban design guidelines just for Hyannis. We need these guidelines for all 7 villages. Each village has a different flavor, a different look and feel as to what it ought to be. When a developer goes to redevelop those villages or the properties within those villages, they need to know the flavor, if you will, of what we're looking for. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of this back and forth because we haven't described for them what it is that we want. I applaud you for the work here that you're doing on the Hyannis downtown district. I think it's really a great start, but your work is not finished. There's still more to do, and I encourage you to pursue that for the remaining villages here in the town of Barnstable. Another thing that's missing, let's see, I got a whole list of things, and I'm not going to take up all your time tonight. You can be sure I'll send some comments into the staff, and it would get to all members of both committees, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It would, I just didn't know how the distribution works. Okay. So I wanted to provide a couple of comments based on a couple of things that you all were talking about tonight. With respect to solar, solar is really very important. It's an important mix in the energy that we are all using every day, even to power the lights here. Solar on rooftops in very urban areas is a really smart thing to pursue. Solar canopies for parking lots are really important to pursue. If you decide to discourage the use of those, I urge you to consider adding street trees in those parking lot areas. Without the solar, what are you doing with that except putting in asphalt? You really need to be putting other amenities into those areas to make parking lots more green, if you will. And they actually become part of the green infrastructure. Rooftop amenities, as the previous public speaker noted, are really important to consider. When you're redeveloping in an area that's very urbanized like this, the rooftop amenities on buildings become very important, and sometimes might be the only access that those residents would have to a public green space. Not really public because it would be private, right, if it's on top of a building. Rooftop solar is important, but also buildings need to serve as telecommunications facilities. We don't want to have one of those big towers in the middle of town, do we? In order to make sure that our cell phones are working. All of the buildings need to have telecommunications facilities on top of them so they can just serve as a distributed antenna system. Lighting, we talked a little bit about lighting. The lighting needs to be downward directed. We need to minimize light pollution. I don't know if it says that in there. Honestly, I didn't read that. Okay. Wrought iron fences. Wrought iron fences can be a unifying element within a community if they're all the same color. If you have a modern styled building, you may need a modern styled fence to support that. But if it's all black, that could be the unifying element within the community itself. Windows. I know you're going to talk about windows after the public comment period, and I have more comments I would share about windows. But they should be non-mirrored and non-reflective. Have you ever walked on the street where there's the reflection of the sun off of a mirrored window? It's really pretty hot. And the reflection of sunlight off of a mirror, as you know, can start a fire. It's something that you really need to think about. If you have landscape mulched planting beds, and there's the reflection of the sun off of a mirrored window into those planting beds, could start a fire. So there's a safety issue there. But the windows should be non-mirrored and non-reflective. So anyway, these design guidelines are a great start. There's a lot more work to be done. I have a lot of detailed comments that I'll be sending in, and I look forward to continuing to participate in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you. Welcome, sir. Thank you. Just
How you
state your
doing?
name
It's
for the record.
Eric Schwab from Hyannis. And I'd like to thank Kathy for her comments, because she's clearly skilled in this area. I'm not. I'm an amateur. But what I prepared for you is my understanding of how a design guideline should be specified. And I noted a couple of gaps in the document you have before you based on previous project approval processes, both before planning and Hyannis Historic. So I went through a whole bunch of public comment, different building review processes, and noted where people were getting hung up. So I'm not trying to pick on any one building, but some buildings just had more trouble than others getting approved, and there are reasons for that. You need a whole section on roofs. So what kind of roofs do you want? Do you want roofs from the 1920s, 1940s, 1960s? Do you want modern roofing materials designated? The other issue is height. How do you measure height? I don't know if you remember the discussion about how they refer to it, the large building overlooking the harbor. There was a massive discussion about how to calculate height. Is it sea level? You know, is it the middle of the building? Is it the top of the building? Does it, you know, can it be as high as the steeple? You know, to compare the mass of the building to a church steeple is inappropriate. It leads to very, very large buildings that are out of scale with the historic nature of this area. You also need design features. You need a lot of design features specified. You have the start of that with windows, but you need to detail bays. Bays are more common in the Boston area. There may be historic examples on the Cape. I'm just not familiar with them, but they're typically used to break up urban streetscapes. So bays are, you know, the little thing that juts out and the different treatments for it. There were huge discussions about balconies. So do you want a Juliet balcony? Do you want a Juliet balcony with wrought iron? You know, do you want a Juliet balcony that's 5 feet or 8 feet? You know, do you want a rooftop balcony? So you need a whole section on balconies if you want them. If you don't want them, you know, clearly the public wants them because on the 307 project, there were several requests for balconies, again, just to break up the facade. Parking, there's a huge section about parking behind the buildings. You don't have any preferences stated about parking in front of the buildings. And that's where you got hung up with how much parking is necessary. So, you know, there's a huge discussion about whether or not parking for 307 is sufficient. Well, that depends on what your tolerance is for parking on the street. You know, if you live in Brighton, Mass., you park on the street. It's not a big discussion, right? You know, the bumper of your car reflects, you know, how close you're parking. But you have an obligation to state, I think you had a term for it, you know, what is that experience on the street and how do cars fit into it? And how do bikes fit into it? Where the, you know, how many bike parking areas are going to be required? You need a whole section on bikes. Sidewalks and trees. You have nowhere have I seen the width of a sidewalk specified anywhere. I just, you know, I haven't seen it, so maybe it exists somewhere. But more importantly, what is the distance from the trees to the building? So, you know, there are different kinds of trees. The trees here that grow extremely well have breadth. So how do we separate, how far does that tree by species need to be from the building? We have 2,800 trees we're about to start planting in Hyannis. So, you know, presumably the trees we plant on Main Street will reflect that inventory and how far the buildings have to be really from where the tree is planted. Storefronts, you got windows, right? But what else? There's more than windows. There's sidewalks, there's, you know, the wrought iron fencing around outdoor dining areas. These are all items that you need to specify. Finally, I need to talk to you about history. I hate to be pedantic. I have no idea what history you're talking about. Are you talking about, you know, 1890? Are you talking about Centerville? Are you talking about Nantucket, you know, the whaling period? Hyannis was defined in the 1920s and 40s. And the first revival was in the 1960s. So the building structures that you should be concerned about are brick with heavy white features. So I highlighted a couple of them, you know, obviously the JFK Museum, post office, two beautiful sort of 20, 40 buildings. You've got more modest buildings, corner of Barnstable. And then even in Falmouth, that's the fourth one here is, that's the Masonic Hall in Falmouth. But you see, this style isn't just downtown Hyannis. It was a downtown style for banks, temples, post offices. So is that the history you're protecting? And what about the TD Bank building? That's the finest example of modern architecture on the Cape. It was designed by Ben Thompson, founder of Design Research, world-renowned architect. And you guys want to demolish it, It's unbelievable, You shouldn't be allowed to demolish that building just based on who designed it. So then just a couple little things. The footprint of these buildings is still too big. So I know that's the responsibility of the town councilors behind me, but do you want influence on the footprint? I mean, like, how big is too big? You should at least talk about that. And if you don't feel it's within your purview, that's fine, but I think you should talk about what you want and give the town councilors here some guidance. Sidewalks, parking, the loading areas are going to be a problem. These larger buildings that are being proposed for Main Street, they need to be serviced constantly. And if there's not parking in the rear or loading bays in the rear, they're going to be loading on the street. So you need to specifically prohibit that. Storefronts, there's a whole thing on storefronts, which I'm not really qualified to speak to. The building heights. So I understand this is a zoning thing, but the heights are not right for this area. And your design guidelines don't reflect that. Your design guidelines are all, 1890 buildings that are 2 or 3 stories tall. Your design guidelines have to reflect something more modern. The mercantile period, 1920s, 40s, 1960s. I mean, you need to be more specific about what you want, because the document you have doesn't create a visual sense. Like, you couldn't give that document, which is excellent, but you couldn't give that document to a designer and get what you want because you're not specifying, you're not speaking a design language. So these are the kind of things that designers look at and say, oh yeah, balconies, wide sidewalks, trees, varied roof lines, I can work with that. So, but your document doesn't have that level of detail, so you just need to work on that a little bit. But otherwise, you're doing a great job, and thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Any other members of the public like to speak? Please come on down. State your name for the record. Welcome, welcome.
How are you guys?
Hi.
Good. I wasn't going to say anything, but just listening gave me a couple thoughts. In your regulations, as far as it seems like Main
Excuse
Street.
me, could you state your name, please?
I'm sorry, Heather Swenson. It seems like Main Street is going to become housing in a lot of these projects that are being proposed. So I would just hope that there's going to be some sort of regulation. I know you said you were mentioning windows, but I think you're talking about shapes of windows. But as far as like window treatments in the buildings, there's got to be some sort of regulation in our historic area to keep Johnny's Power Ranger bedsheet from being used as a curtain, or the blinds that the dog destroys so they look all crappy from the street. There's got to be some sort of regulation in our historic district to keep Main Street from looking that way. Same way, if there's going to be balconies on these buildings that you approve, there's got to be some sort of a regulation as to what people are allowed to have on those balconies. It's our Main Street. We're going to have people walking. You just need some sort of regulation. And also, if these buildings are going to be apartments on Main Street, you have to think about moving vans in our summertime, and what is our Main Street going to be like when you have a U-Haul moving people in and out of an apartment? All things to just think of. And also, once you build out our Main Street, you take away locations and you make them housing, then where does downtown small business grow? Where do we then go to if there's no longer storefront space because it's now housing? So I think you have to think about where your housing should be and where your downtown small business Main Street should be. Those are just my couple things that came to mind while I was listening. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Great,
you.
Thank you so much. Any other members of the public? Come on down, state your name for the record. Okay, let's go to the board now and dive in a little bit deeper to anything that the board would like to discuss. One thing myself that came up a couple times were bay windows and balconies, which is covered under Section C, massing articulation, page 22. I'm not sure if, what items are on a balcony is really the jurisdiction of these boards, but certainly something we can talk about. I think it's pretty clear that balconies are encouraged and bay or oriel windows are encouraged as well. I think that's something that we all thought was important. All right. I wanted to get into windows, if that's okay with everybody. One of the sections talking about windows are page 27, and kind of the two things on my mind. One of them, composite windows are permissible upon review. Again, we're trying to help an applicant know what to do here. Could we add anything that could explain what would make composite windows permissible? Is that something that we could elaborate upon a little bit?
Define a composite window.
Yeah, just something to help an applicant. So that was one thing, and then the other thing, on the next page, page 28, it mentions, 2/2. We had talked quite a bit, 2/2, 1/1, 3/3, 4/4, whatever. But that didn't make it in here. Is that something that we just decided not to get that specific? Do you remember, Jim? I know that came up, but that isn't specified in here. Did we just kind of leave that open-ended because that's what direction we were going? Do you happen to remember?
Yeah, just a moment. I believe we do start to touch on it, but I don't believe one second.
There's two areas that talk about windows. Yeah, the other one I think is page 20, C, fenestration. And on that one, it does mention vinyl windows are only allowed if they have appropriate character for the cape.
What was that last page?
Oh, yeah, we're comparing page 20 with pages 27 and 28.
20 and 27.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. And that's also, so page 20 is the tail end of the regulations, and 20
And then, yeah, 27, 28 is the guidelines.
is the tail end of the same guidelines.
And I did want to note, too, while we have a moment here, fenestration, item C, highly reflective and dark tinted glass are prohibited. I know that was mentioned by a member of the public. I think that's a good thing. Page 20, CC.
Yeah, I don't believe the exact ratio made it into the regulations. I know we did have a lengthy discussion over 2/1 or what may be the preferred option, or 2/2. But I don't think we ended up with a specific. We can certainly revisit that if we wish.
I would say, I'm just going to throw this out there, it is tough to regulate a specific type of window. If it's a 2/2, 6/6, it kind of goes with the scale of the window, the height, the width, the character, the architectural style of the building. I mean, looking behind us, we have, I think is that an 8/2? That could also be an 8/8 too, so it's a tough thing to just to throw a dart at and say, that's the one that we want. It kind of ties more in with the overall character of the building. And I think it's something that you want to regulate the process, maybe not necessarily the product, but
Yeah.
also we want to see a certain type of product, come in front of the board. So it's a tough thing to exactly, put the pin in.
Yeah, I'm remembering the conversation now. I think that we discussed that a bit and decided it, didn't want to get too specific and nail it down.
Can I make a suggestion? Because I think this brings up a very important point. And one of our speakers had brought up as well with regard to the windows and the, be within the character, et cetera. As in CA, vinyl windows are only allowed if they have appropriate character for the Cape. How about putting in a A1 or whatever, that something like size and shape appropriate with character of the Cape, which gets out of oddly shaped windows, but of the right material, but something that keeps within the character. It leaves it at the discretion to be interpreted, to keep it within the historic nature and reflecting what we're trying to preserve, but also allowing for construction and growth and whatever else.
Trying to get the word size and shape in there.
Try to get, put that as
Yeah, I like that.
yeah, size and shape appropriate for character of the Cape.
I like that. Anybody opposed to that?
Well, going back to what you said, though, isn't the size and shape going to depend upon the opening, what kind of building it's on? I mean, it just seems like that's a little bit too pigeonholed. You're kind of nailing something down there. They should bring it to us, and then we could look at it and say, that doesn't fit, or whatever the case is, but leave them the opportunity to present what they want, and then kind of go from there. I mean, that's my opinion. I just thought that was a good point.
The argument is if there's not some sort of reference to it in here, then that's not in your purview. So we want to leave some sort of commission of being able to protect it. And then they can always come for a regulatory agreement to planning, whatever, something else.
Yeah.
I just think we have to put something in there to try to protect.
Add a little bit more detail.
A little bit more detail. A little bit more.
I mean, certainly
requirement to
appropriate
not
character
be
for the
outlandish.
Cape is vague.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need
Right.
something that the board can reference in its
Yeah.
justification for one of these reviews. It's
Like
something needs to
discouraged.
be there.
Something to point to.
That we use, yes.
So, if I may offer just some language, if we're referring to, so window size and shape, right? So, Ed, I heard appropriate scale. So in the guidelines, potentially to reference something, the size and shape of windows shall be of an appropriate size and scale in accordance with the massing of the structure proposed.
And historic character of the
I think that's well
area.
said.
Historic character of the area. Yes, does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah, I think that's well said.
That's great.
If I can address what, Heather, I believe it was you when you spoke to us. You were talking about the window curtains and things like that. I don't think that's really in our purview, unfortunately. But I would hope, and we would certainly encourage, that an association be requested to kind of keep that in mind, because they form an association rules in that. But I don't believe we have any jurisdiction to dictate.
That would be an
Yeah.
interior
Yeah,
feature.
it's an
Yeah.
interior feature, yeah. But I do understand what you're talking about.
Okay, any other areas that the board would like to dive a little bit deeper into? Any questions the board may have, comments, concerns? Board or commission, I should say.
You had mentioned the windows, and there was one other thing you had.
Oh, boy. I don't know. I think we hit it. I'm okay at this time. If anybody else has anything else they'd like to hit, dive deeper into. Yeah, go ahead. Right. Oh, turn your mic on, sorry.
Sorry. The other thing was balconies that was mentioned. The but I don't think we have any purview on what goes on that either.
Now, see, that's where I kind of changed my mind a little bit. A balcony is an outdoor feature. When you put a balcony on, the whole world can see that. So there should
Out
be
inside the balcony.
no inside. But what I mean is, once you hang a balcony out there, now that's open to the world.
Right.
So I think there should be some kind of, I don't say regulations, but there should be some kind of decorum that you could, you can't be hanging
Right.
wet bathing suits on the balcony for a few days or something like that. I don't know how to do that,
This could
but
be a
I do
rabbit
think
hole.
once you're in the balcony stage, you're outside now. It's a little bit different. That's my opinion.
It's a fair
I agree.
comment. Jim, I'm going to ask you for some enlightenment on that, and you're flipping through the pages.
Jim, we
and I
need
think we're
50
fine.
fresh pages on what can happen on a
Come on, Jim,
balcony.
you do it. You get in trouble. Go ahead, say it.
Yeah. You know what, I will say, Jim is a wordsmith, and maybe we can come up with a way to articulate
Wordsmith,
that.
I
That's-
like it.
Yeah, that is a tough one, though.
Yeah.
It's-
I think
It's a tall
Commissioner
ask.
Matthews is correct that it is outside, so therefore it's kind of one of these vague things.
I think that's something maybe, let me just, you can tell me, because you're a wordsmith, you're better than I. But that's something maybe that the tenant can, or excuse me, the whatever it is, an apartment board, whatever, the developer, that could be one of the regulations they have for their tenants who are in the building, who are renting. That might be, that's not out of our way, but that's my thought.
Yeah, potentially in a development. I would say an HOA could certainly offer those regulations, and if it was, say, a regulatory agreement, or maybe even a special permit from the planning board, that discussion could be had. I would say it's not objects on a balcony, or I would argue, are not an architectural feature. Balconies certainly are, and can be regulated, and are in this stated as encouraged. To encourage the building facades that face the public right away, so that residents can engage with the streetscape. However, again, yeah, I would offer the quick opinion that for the Historic Commission, it would be things left on a balcony, such as a bathing suit, would not be an architectural feature.
Right.
Would not be an architectural.
Would
No,
not.
bathing suit would not,
would
but
not.
some things
The
outside and
balcony.
balconies are. So, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to put a newspaper editor with a wordsmith here. So
there you go.
how about an addition of something along the lines of any outside features of the structure that are viewed by the general public beyond the building to be maintained and in keeping with the historic character?
I like that.
You do or you don't?
I do, I like
Okay.
that.
Any other takers?
You could make an argument that the historic character would allow you to dry your clothes on the balcony.
Well, that's true.
Right, so I think an alternative might be, from a zoning perspective, that all items placed on balconies under the public safety purview should be sufficiently secured.
Sure.
Right, so therefore, if you leave your bathing suit on there and it flies onto somebody's car windshield on Main Street and they drive into Alberto's, you can say, well, we told you so. Right?
A bay
I mean, I think
window
that's
is
the only- I
an
think that's the
enclosed
only- I
balcony.
think that's the only way you can deal with it.
Can
Yeah.
we add so nobody sufficiently secures an 8-foot neon artwork that they've maintained to be, and it may be maintained and in keeping with the historic character?
Yeah, but I think you have a hard time proving what the historic character of a balcony is. Right? I mean, I don't think there's a precedent. I don't think there's any, I can't go look up in the home design guidelines of the Great American Home as to what was appropriate to put on your balcony. I mean, two tables and a chair, right?
Yeah.
I think from a public safety perspective or another regulation, obviously, and again, from a liability perspective, if something were to blow off of it and cause damage, right, totally different animal. And everyone understands that is not, you would be liable for the damage caused by that. But I think if somebody wants to put a pink Christmas tree on their balcony this week, then they should be allowed to do so, as long as it's sufficiently secured, right? I mean, it's their living space. At a certain point, we got to stop reaching into people's private spaces and allow them to live their life. So maybe we just get rid of balconies.
I like to secure the balconies. I think secure the objects on the balcony. I think that's great.
Or you put in the design guidelines that, should balconies be present, that, the homeowner association should be encouraged to provide
That I like.
regulations that otherwise.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a hard, you
Yeah.
can't police it unless there's like damage, and then we're
Yeah.
going to rip all the balconies down in Barnstable.
Or
You
make
know.
the homeowners association responsible for.
Well, they
the-
would
the-
be, I would think.
Well, they would be,
Yeah.
but still.
If there was
make
a
it clear.
large multifamily
Right,
building with,
right.
50 different apartments with balconies, it could be a home, it could be a,
Yep.
Right.
I think that's a good way to go with it.
Well,
Okay.
not quite in the same subject, but it brings a thought to mind, planters, window boxes, that sort of thing. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's worse than a bathing suit, isn't it? So it's.
But that's
yeah.
also, that is something that starts to become attached to a building. And architecturally can be designed with a building. I mean, generally, I think they are historic, window boxes and those sorts of plans. I think they
And they enhance the,
should be
Yeah.
enhanced, but I think, is there any language in here for that? It should maybe be part of the
No.
purview of the
Can-
historic review.
Can we leave Jim to do his magic?
Wordsmith it.
yeah. And I will say, we've all come up, I think, with some great revisions that I feel would make it challenging for us to have a motion on this evening. So as much as I'd like for that to happen, I feel like we need to give Jim the chance to work these changes into a new, fresh draft.
I would totally agree with that. And to be fair, though, I think we're quite close.
Oh, I agree. I think that will give us all a chance to review a fresh
Yeah.
draft, come to the next meeting.
Yep.
And it'd be a relatively quick.
I totally agree with you. I think it's just a matter of tweaking the fine tune. Does
Agreed.
everyone else agree with that? Or anything else to be brought up?
I think if we tried to make a motion with the changes, our heads would explode.
Yeah, no, there'd be a lot of
Yeah,
addendums.
right.
Okay. What else do we have on the agenda? We don't have minutes.
Really, it's
No, I
just,
think that's just this. Are
yeah,
there
I
any
mean-
other amendments?
Yeah, and anybody else have anything they want to dive any deeper into?
And we have
While
not
we're here,
closed
going
public
through it.
comment yet.
No, and I think, in the case that we do continue, I say we leave the public hearing open, let the public have a chance to
Sure.
read the new draft and offer new comments at whatever date we schedule. So anything,
Agreed.
I agree.
all right, anything we want to dive deeper into right now?
I do want to thank the people who came here tonight, sat through this, members of the public, and for all of your contribution. It's very valuable. Thank you.
Excellent. Well said, Cheryl.
Do we need to continue to a date certain?
I would think so.
Yeah, I think
that's-
Jim's
that might
taking a
be-
peek at
that
that
might be
now.
Jim's
Yeah,
looking at.
Dublin,
So
January.
planning board is next set to meet, I believe, on December 13th.
I think we need to give
Or is
the
it at the
wordsmith
11th?
some
I'm
time
sorry, the
to
11th.
edit the document as well.
That's fine.
Yeah, our
working.
next is December. On the 11th.
Which one? So the planning board does have at least one agenda item. The board potentially could take up that after having the joint meeting if,
Can I just ask, Karen, can you check the Human Services Committee? I think that'd be third week. I think we're good, because it's the third, we should be good.
And again, I think that we have made huge progress here, so I think it will be a quick kind of finalization. You know what I mean?
Actually, Jim, can I just ask a point of order? This would have a motion to adopt from the planning board. Would it also get a motion to adopt from the historic, the same, and then it goes to town council, or does it go from here to there, then to town council? How does it go from here?
so these are design guidelines for both the planning board and for the historic commission to amend and adopt from time to time. So it's your design guidelines. So yes, there are two separate motions that need to occur. The planning board is amending section 7 of the design and infrastructure plan, which is the design standards for the planning board, and incorporating these. I can have a motion prepared to that effect. The historic commission would be adopting these, essentially replacing the supplemental guidelines from 2012 and adopting these in its place. There was a discussion actually at the historic commission about maybe then coming to town council to provide an update as to all the good work that has been performed. And actually a great comment about maybe even coming to the local comprehensive plan as they start to engage in phase 2 of their development. Because certainly, a lot of good work's already been done, why reinvent the wheel? And we can incorporate some of this into the local comprehensive plan. And maybe something that comes out of the local comprehensive plan can be considered for a future draft of this as well. So again, this shouldn't be a stagnant document. I think, ultimately adopting some improved design guidelines is certainly a good next step, but as we plan and we grow or when we preserve, other things will come out of it that you can certainly look to amend from time to time.
That's great to hear.
It's a living document.
I love it.
What might be an idea, because I know we have certainly had on the HHDC, and I wager that the planning has also had, things that come up that don't quite fit in with each other, and as Jim has indicated, it's probably going to still happen that those come up. And since we can continue to amend, maybe do a regular check-in or assign one person out of each commission to keep that laid. Hey, we've got something that's come up, so it doesn't cause a stumbling block for you.
Sure.
Because then that's just a simple matter of amending or doing an addendum.
Right, it's much a similar process. It may not be as simple, but it will take some time, obviously, to consider proper drafts and all that. But yeah, it's certainly within your general ordinance that states that you are able and eligible to review for your design standards from time to time.
I just think coming together under one document that we're both following is a major step forward. I mean, that's just the key. This is a huge part.
Yeah, I agree. And this collaboration has been
Yep.
wonderful. And maybe we get together once a year to have a joint meeting to review the document.
And pizza.
There you go. I love it.
I love it.
That's great.
Jim will throw in the pizza, right?
I got
Oh,
you.
yeah.
Wordsmith's buying it. So
There
it'll
you
be
go.
good.
So are we entertaining a
He's
motion?
really
Mr.
catching on.
Do we have,
To continue to the 13th at a time
are we good for
certain?
December 13th, everyone?
7:30?
So I know the planning boards that's their regular scheduled meeting, so I'd certainly check with the Historic Commission.
Commission
December-
members opposed to the 13th?
It would be the 11th, actually. That's
Sorry.
that's
Sorry, the
11th.
11th.
December 11th is.
Yeah,
the-
Monday, December 11th.
Okay, I'll make that. I know I know it's something on the 13th, but I'd make it happen either way. 11th?
The 11th,
Yes.
7 p.m. Yep.
So I would
Well, on
entertain-
vacation, that's fine with me.
So I
You're on
would-
vacation?
Well, I mean, I'll be here.
Oh, okay.
Oh, good.
Cape Cod
You can
vacation.
give it all your focus. That's good.
I
Okay.
have to do all the things my wife told me to do around the house.
We'll bring-
That's that vacation.
So I would move that we continue the public hearing to December 11th at 7:30 PM.
I'll second that. Oh, you have to. We have
I
to
think
do
we're
each
going to
way,
do it
right?
separately again,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
So a second from planning?
Real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
You okay with 7?
I thought you already had something on the agenda.
Well, it's all up to you guys which order you want to do. I just figured since the
think
commission would
that
be
was
there
what
as well.
This would be first?
Okay, that's fine, we can do 7 o'clock. I'll retract that and modify the motion to continue the public hearing to December 11th at 7 PM.
Excellent. And a second?
I'll
Second.
Thank you, Tim. All those in favor? Michael?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye.
I will also make a motion that the HHDC attend with a joint planning board and HHDC meeting with regard to these guidelines and regulations to December 11th at 7 PM. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Cronin?
Aye.
Commissioner Crowley? Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews?
Aye.
Commissioner Kay? I also say aye.
Thank you very much. Well done. Is there any final board or commission comments, questions, concerns before we have a motion to adjourn? Okay, we'll start with planning. Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Tim. And a second.
Michael, second.
Thank you, Michael. All those in favor? Michael?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye.
Motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Kay. Commissioner Cronin?
Aye.
Commissioner Crowley? Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews?
Aye.
Commissioner Kay? I also say aye. We are adjourned.
Well done.
Thank you to staff, by the way, for all of your help.